Inclusion and diversity are two concepts that help in integrating a global workforce with the organization goals. Basically, the biggest risk that any workforce that is global faces is in terms of managing the interests of the inclusive and the diverse workforce. Diversity is being called to the party and inclusiveness is dancing in the party. An appropriate inclusive behavior is one where if 40 people have come to a climate change conference, one has to understand and appreciate the kind of interests that each of the 40 people have at the climate change conference and focusing in terms of rewarding the appropriate inclusive and diverse behavior. The idea today is that there should not be any reckless behavior by one group that helps in jeopardizing the interests of the other group, and it's important that no reckless behavior is appreciated, and at the same time everybody in the group focuses in terms of balancing the inclusive and the diverse behaviors that are there in a group. As a founder of Channels Brief, I discussed about the dark side of the web, and today most of the people who are anonymous, who are not sharing their identity, who are not sharing their details, are anonymous, and these are the anonymous people who do cyber attacks, who actually engage in illegal activities and behaviors that can actually jeopardize a global company. Today, it's very important that the inclusive and diverse workforce behavior is rewarded and appreciated and celebrated. And one of the biggest inclusive behaviors is to not really focus on a person's identity or a personal information. A person's personal information is not the business of any organization that hires, and also an organization has to be aware of the legal repercussions of making any personal attack on any individual or an employee. An employee-employer arrangement is has to follow the principles of being clear on moral hazard, on conflict of interest, and not allowing any company to be guilty in the areas of moral hazard and conflict of interest. Inclusion and diversity is principles of appreciating people irrespective of what their backgrounds are. The personal information of an employee is not an information that an employer should use to jeopardize the interests of the employee. Two of the top principles in diversion and inclusiveness is that diversity is being called to the party, and inclusiveness is dancing in the party. Now that party could be a climate change conference. I attended one of the largest climate change conference at Toronto Cultural Center with the Canadian Prime Minister and with the entire team, including Canadians who have been living for a large number of years. And I went there as a team leader. I was able to share about the climate change conference with various members of the Toronto local riding, and telling them in terms of this is a conference, and I also shared it with top ad agencies and top businesses in the region. Now, an appropriate inclusive behavior is that looking at everybody and not kind of mistrusting them, and also ensuring that the entire group is committed to the larger goal of the particular climate change conference, because today climate change is a big emergency wherein every company, every institution, every organization has to safeguard themselves against the political, social, environmental and the economic hazards that climate change faces. Now, one of the appropriate inclusive behaviors and diverse behaviors is that to appreciate that and not and reduce the kind of food wastage that happens if we are spending a lot of money on food and we are wasting it and we are not eating it. The other appropriate inclusive behavior and inclusive and diverse behavior is to understand and appreciate the moral hazard if an employer does not take complete responsibility for the actions of the employee. One of the other areas, one of the other legal concepts that everybody has to appreciate is conflict of interest. Now, conflict of interest is that if there is a large group that is having an interest in a particular action, then if any member is behaving in a way which is different from the group, then that's a conflict of interest. And that's why today most of the employers and employees have to consent to legal rights and focus in terms of the right behavior that can safeguard themselves legally. So, for example, if it's a customer service agent, and a customer service agent has to appreciate all the customer queries that are there, they have to not just press on a hold button or transfer or do a cold transfer. And in terms of transferring a person's request to a department where their needs are not met, a warm transfer is where engaging in terms of transferring the request of a customer to a department where the right kind of instructions are addressed, so that both the customer and the department and the employer's needs are addressed on a win-win-win basis. At the same time, over phone, any company or any financial services or any employer does not have the right to ask for details. If there are details being asked, then there has to be a schedule given and sent that, hey, these are the details we want to ask, and we would like to know in terms of what has your responses been. And I have been a person who has actually been very good in terms of understanding all the financial and the legal details, whether it is the balance sheet, it's the financial statement, it's the earnings, so that if somebody asks me about it, I should be prepared in terms of what are the details and what are the focus areas for a company and organization that is following inclusion and diversity details. And then I do the review and I ensure that everybody is on the same page, where I do not ensure that one reckless behavior jeopardizes the interests of a large company, and at the same time we ensure that everybody's behavior is appreciated and addressed.